All right, everyone, our favorite time of the week again. We get to answer a few of your questions. What's up first?
Number 1 from Harry Jung, CIA podcast, The Langley Files. Hello, Breaking Points. Have you listened to the newly released official CIA podcast called The Langley Files? The current CIA director was their first guest. What are your thoughts? Is this basically another PSYOP from the CIA? I don't know if it's a PSYOP. I have not listened to it. I know somebody who did listen to it. Well, I mean, it's not a very good PSYOP.
Really?
It's a PSYOP. Well, I mean, why, like,
but I think they do lots of not that good PSYOPs, you know?
Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. I saw it as more of a cringe public affairs endeavor. Like, 10 years too late, being like, the kids are all listening to podcasts these days.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, let's start. I have a friend who just went to.
I feel like that is a PSYOP. Like trying to shape young people to like be pro-CIA.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. My friend just went. He was walking through campus recently. He's going to law school. He was walking through and saw a CIA recruiting event, and he went by, and he said it was one of the lamest things that he's ever attended.
That's funny.
For lawyers. So I guess they're not even that good at it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's just cringe or not. I mean, do we expect anything interesting to come out of it? No.
It reminds me of the their whole like woke CIA ad campaign. Like I'm a Latina I'm making this up, first generation college educated who suffers from like anxiety disorder or something like that, and I'm CIA. So yeah, I mean, I think yes, they're trying to get cool and hip with the times, and convince young people that they're good and that they should be pro-CIA.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here.
All
so
right. PSYOP it is.
It is a PSYOP.
It's a PSYOP.
I actually have been meaning to listen to it, so I might go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Next question from Nancy Ryback. Sackler criminal family. I've been a subscriber since the day you started. Love the show. Thank you.
Shout out.
Why is the Sackler family still walking around in society? Great question. The opioid crisis, now the fentanyl crisis. The deaths of people between 18 and 45 have risen over 50%. This is blatantly in our face because of this family. What happened to drug dealers having all their money and material goods stripped from them and put in jail? Huge problem in Western democracy where the rich get away with literally mass murder, which is what this is. I know you've discussed this, have actually answered one of my questions on the family in the past. Could you possibly do a segment on what is the status of the Sackler family and what they're up to now? It actually is probably time for an update. I saw More Perfect Union just did a deep dive into this as well. But I think you're absolutely right about this being a core issue in American society, and not just with the Sackler family, but in a lot of ways, you did a monologue on this week, Saagar. Our current political landscape is a direct result of what happened with the 2008 financial crash, and the fact that, ordinary homeowners got completely screwed, and none of the rich banking executives who caused the global economy to literally collapse. None of them faced any penalties whatsoever. In fact, many of them went on to get bonuses and all of these sorts of things. And so that was just so in your face of this two-tier system of justice and who this country is really run for. I do think it's a big, big problem at the core rot of our society.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. Because at a certain point, it's just so absurd what's happening with the Sacklers, because they were originally supposed to have that settlement with the DOJ. They basically got off scot-free, even though we have all the text messages, emails.
Kept a lot of their wealth.
They kept a huge portion of their wealth. In fact, the only consequences they're suffering are social. I just read today the Victoria and Albert Museum of London is cutting its ties with the Sackler. Right. The Smithsonian, I think, also took off.
There's like a museum in New York or some shit.
Right. The Metropolitan Museum, I think, also removed them. But, Harvard University still has like its Sackler family name on there. So all they're suffering are like high social consequences. I mean, what? They don't know how to change their name or like get remarried.
Well, here's the other thing, though, is the Sacklers were the biggest problem in terms of the opioid crisis. But I mean, Johnson & Johnson, all these companies got in on it. And so the bigger issue is like, how do you reform the system so that health insurance companies and big pharma aren't like incentivized to destroy the country, addict people, create completely unhealthy lifestyle, like all those things. I mean, that's really the core of the problem, is our grotesque, corrupt healthcare system that leads to people like the Sacklers taking advantage of the system as it is.
I totally agree. All right, number 3, what do we got? Mark Deshawn, what's going on with gas prices? Why is nobody talking about it? Hey, I'm just curious with gas prices in California. They shot up more than $1 in the last 2 weeks. Costco and Arco, normally the cheapest ones around here, are in the mid-5. Everywhere else is over 6. It's a national problem or just a California problem. Nobody's talking about this. Well, luckily for you, Mark, as you know, I'm kind of obsessed with gas prices. So I'll tell you what's going on. I literally was just looking at this. So in the last week, there has been a massive jump in inventory problems on the West Coast. California is up 55 cents a gallon. Oregon is 45 cents a gallon. Alaska, 45 cents a gallon. Washington up 41 cents a gallon. Arizona and Nevada up by 34 and 33. So what's happening? Basically, have record low inventories in terms of the amount of available gas that is available, which drives up the demand, or which drives up, demand is static, supply is low, you get high price. That's what's happening. The price on the West Coast is very high because the supply is low. Part of the issue is that we stopped the strategic petroleum reserves. We also are having really big problems right now with our refineries. There's a big bottleneck happening because we have very low refined product inventory. And so when that happens, then the areas of the country which are harder to get gas to have, by definition, the lowest amount of gas in their available inventory, one of the lowest on record. The West is always going to suffer, especially when we don't have the Jones Act, or so when we have the Jones Act and it applies to oil. So that's the exact reason about why this is happening. That's why I was telling you in our show, one of our shows this week, and I was like, look, we have a hurricane, it's gonna be a serious problem. And that's what I'm talking about. If we have a hurricane and it wipes out a refinery, or if it keeps it offline for 2-3 weeks, we have such inventory problems, gas would be like $7.50 a gallon in California, like overnight.
The other issue is that because so much of these commodities markets are driven by speculation, even anticipation of a problem can sort of trigger these like multiplying price effects.
Right.
So you have a bunch of people who are betting on what the price of oil is going to be. And they think that, okay, Hurricane Ian might cause some disruption. So I'm going to bet on, you know, there being this problem with supply and that's going to increase the price. And so that in and of itself, even if the disruption doesn't turn out to be all that you expected, you have these amplifying effects from all of the speculation that goes into these markets. So that's part of the story of what's going on there right now as well.
All right. Number 4.
Yes, so we have Matthew Swartz. What are your top normal podcasts? I just got done listening to Counterpoints and switched over to one of my other consistent listening choices, Mark Smelly Bells, which Saagar apparently is familiar with. Saagar got a mention. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Outside of the political world, what other platforms do you guys delve into?
Shout out to my boy Nsima Yang, the bodybuilders. I love those guys over there.
That's funny.
Let's check. Mark Bells, for those who don't know, is Chris Bell's brother. He did that great documentary, Bigger, Stronger, Faster, on steroids in 2008. Fantastic. So
Interesting.
Mark Bell's a really interesting guy. Okay. So in terms of my most listened to, I listen to Hardcore History, the Explorers podcast, the Meat Eater podcast with Steve Ranella, who I love, the Huberman Lab podcast. I also re-listened to Serial after your monologue, Krystal.
Did you?
Yeah, so I did that.
Listened to that too.
I listened to Peter Attia's podcast,
It's so
The
good,
Drive.
isn't it? Serial. You understand why it was such a national
Oh, it was
praise.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I re-listened to it. It was great.
Yeah.
I also listened to a podcast of my favorite trashy reality television show about Below Deck, which is on Bravo. Shout out to those guys who are apparently fans of ours as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was so
that's
funny
cool.
because I was listening to this. It's extremely trashy reality television, like terrible. And I like went and followed some of the guys. Some of the cast members are actually fans of the show.
Yeah.
But I went and I followed my favorite like reaction podcast. They're like, holy shit! This guy literally goes, "Is this actually Saagar?" I was like, "Yeah, it's me, dude." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I couldn't believe you watched the show." I'm like, "I know, I can't, but I can't look away. I can't look away."
There's a history podcast I really like called Conflicted. That's one that I listen to a lot. I'm a big fan of Brianna's podcast, Bad Faith.
Yeah.
I mean, most of mine are like, I listen to podcasts that are going to help me with the show. So I've been listening to podcasts right now about like, what happens if Russia deploys a nuclear weapon? I've been listening to War on the Rocks.
Oh, that's good.
Those
guys are good.
Michael Kaufman. I mean, it just like goes into granular detail about what's going on the ground there. Where's some of the other ones that I listen to? None of mine are fun. Mine are all like,
See, I'm always
the
listening.
most fun is the history stuff.
Yeah.
Everything else is like, I'll look up things that are specific to whatever we're going to cover so that I can try to get like as much context and in-depth information as I can.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Last
bored.
podcast. All right, last question. Chris Taylor, Section 230. Do you feel service providers such as Microsoft, Google, Cloudflare should be responsible for removing phishing and fraud viruses for their platform, given the fact that 230 makes them immune from liability? I'm not so sure about that one. The reason we took this question is what's really cool is that literally as we were taping this, the Supreme Court just granted cert to a case which is specifically going to challenge 230 at the court level, Krystal. It'll be the first time that they've ever considered it. So that's really interesting. But the ruling is not, see, this is where it gets dicey, which is that the case is some people who said that YouTube was aiding and abetting terrorism by not removing videos of the Paris massacre in 2015. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, that's bullshit. Like, I'm
Yeah,
totally,
absolutely.
you know, like that's, first of all,
to
as a
that.
news, what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Right.
You know, that's insane. Of course you need to have clips of that. If it's horrific, people need to see it. I was thinking about this in the context of Russia, why censorship is so stupid. All I wanted to do when Putin was speaking was watch a goddamn live stream of the speech
Dubbed
in
in
English
English.
subtitles, which RT used to have in English. I'm not saying RT isn't bullshit, but that's useful. Instead, I gotta rely on the Kremlin to put out their English translation 3 hours later, or some guy who's translating live on Twitter.
Not to mention, you know, we have our we have all kinds of propaganda outlets.
Right.
But the one that is most blatant is Voice of America.
Yeah.
That's allowed to be up.
Right, and that's fine. I don't care.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, the application of this, like, RT and Voice of America are the same. They're both state, like, run, state-backed propaganda. And so you have completely different treatment depending on, you know, what the view is from the U.S. foreign policy establishment, essentially, of the countries and the networks. So just for people who don't understand, Saagar, explain to them what Section 230 is.
Okay, Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act, amended in the 1990s in response to the rise of the internet, effectively says that the companies do not have a, quote, liability and have the ability in order to adjudicate the content which is on their site without facing criminal penalty. So really what it meant—
they're not publishers in the way that, like, a newspaper is.
Yes,
so you're not responsible for the content necessarily that's posted
And
on
it kind of
the
makes
platform.
sense. So your Yahoo News in 1990 of this crazy message board, should you be criminally liable for what all the commenters are saying in your chat section? Like, no, that sounds completely insane. The allegation is that they've taken this too far and they have the ability to censor and to stamp a stamp on people's free speech rights, even though it's not clearly articulated.
The idea is that they're acting like publishers, even though they're still benefiting from this law that says they're not publishers.
And but the reason why I remain skeptical and scared is that many of the people who are most pro-censorship want to take 230 away because they want the publishers. They want them to act as their publishers, as in, like, for censorship. So anyway, I haven't yet been convinced as to which way things should go. I'm much more in favor of, like, common carrier law, although apparently there is some indication the court may take up some law that would discuss internet companies and ISPs in the same way that we would view common carriers. I don't know the exact details. I was talking to a Supreme Court kind of analyst friend of mine, so that's something we should take a look at as well.
Yeah, it's be something to dig into with Rachel Bovard, Matt Stoller.
Yeah, we can go real deep
going
on this
deep on
thing.
this one.
It really, I could see all sides of the debate on this. I truly can. Okay, we'll see you guys later.
Bye, y'all.